Your birth chart is a calendar, one that's unique to you because it's a picture of the heavens at the moment of your birth. You can think of it as a screenshot of the sky, your sky, and this individualized star map will guide you throughout your entire life. It tells you when you're in season or out, and when it's a good time to start a venture or think better of it. It shows you grace periods where you can breeze right past obstacles, and it gives you a heads up on future rough patches where you can expect resistance. And that was one of my favorite passages from Christopher Renstrom's book, The Cosmic Calendar. The book outlines a way to turn your birth chart into a calendar that's uniquely aligned with your natural flow and personal seasons. I couldn't help but imagine how amazing it would be if Christopher could teach an online course based on the content, providing an opportunity to teach the content live, answer your questions as you apply the ideas in your life, and hold your hand as you map out your personal cosmic calendar. I'm happy to announce that dream has come true, and registration for the Cosmic Calendar online course is now open. No more feeling like you're swimming against the tide as you try to accomplish things before the time is right, or missing windows of opportunity because you weren't ready to take action. Now's the time to experience having the full support of the universe behind you. Enrollment is now open. Class begins in March, and you can go to astrologyhub.com/cosmic calendar to reserve your spot today. And Inner Circle members, be sure to check your membership portal for your discount code. Again, that's astrologyhub.com/cosmic calendar. We can't wait to see you in class. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. This is our flagship show dedicated to sharing the multitude of astrological perspectives and approaches. We feature up-and-coming astrologers, as well as living legends in the field, as well as astronomers, which we have here today, demonstrating how astrology can support you in so many different areas of your life. Today, I am so pleased to be here with Harriet Witt. And today we're going to be talking about why astronomy and astrology should really just get back together. No more of this being apart. We may as well just get back together. So Harriet's going to talk to us about this and why she believes this is to be true. And before we dive in, I wanted to remind you that the Cosmic Calendar, our 3-week course with astrologer Christopher Renstrom, is open for enrollment. We actually start class next week. So this is also another class that is demonstrating both astrology and astronomy, because you're really working with the timing of the actual transits. You're going to get to see the history of how people have used astrology and astronomy to tell time and to create calendars. And so this class is going to be offering a lot of depth and richness to add to your practice so that you can actually take the astrology, map it with your own personal chart, and use it to make decisions about timing in your life. And this class is great for all levels. So if you're a beginner, all the way to someone who is a seasoned pro, you're going to be able to get something out of this class that is new and different and directly applicable in your life. You can go to astrologyhub.com/cosmic calendar to learn more and enroll today. Okay, so we have Harriet Witt here with us. Harriet is someone who I have spent time with in person under the night sky and just been delighted in her presence. I mean, I like hang on this woman's words because she makes the sky come to life in such a tangible way. She tells amazing stories about the stars, and there's certain concepts in astronomy and astrology that she just brings to life in a way that I haven't experienced before. And Harriet does live here on Maui. And again, I've had the pleasure of knowing her. Harriet's also the person who, when I first moved to Maui, would sit in women's circle on the full moon. And Harriet would come to talk about the astrology of that full moon. So one of my very first introductions into astrology and working with the moon cycles, around a fire with a bunch of women on the slopes of Haleakala, which is the volcano that we live on. And it's just magical to be in her presence. So this is the first time we've had her on the Astrology Hub podcast, which is kind of blowing my mind. I'm not quite sure why that has happened that way, but it has. And so I'm just going to go through Harriet's bio, and then we're going to have her tell her story. But she has more than 30 years experience teaching astronomy and environmental education. Harriet has had articles published in Sky and Telescope, Whole Earth Review, The Griffith Observer, and Spirit of Aloha magazine. Ironically, the initial spark for some of Harriet's most popular science articles were given to her in dreams by ancient wisdom keepers. As a teacher of celestial navigation to the crew of Hokulea, voyaging canoe in preparation for its voyage to Rapa Nui, Harriet's movement-based teaching was inspired by the tradition of Native Hawaiians to pass on their knowledge of astronomy through dance and chant. So we are so happy to have you here, Harriet. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, well, let's start with your story. You're actually the first one we've had on the podcast who started as an astronomer. So your first craft was astronomy. Tell us how you got into astronomy and then how you decided to bring astrology into your practice.
I got into astronomy to save my sanity. I was born in 1943. And when I was 6 weeks old, my father was drafted and had to go fight the Nazis. Several years later, when he came back, he had really bad PTSD, but it was never treated. It was never even diagnosed because PTSD wasn't recognized by psychologists for another 30 years. And so he would fly into rages often. And I thought there was something horribly wrong with me because I was being screamed at all the time. You know, a little kid doesn't know about PTSD. I thought there was something horribly wrong with me. And somewhere along the line, as a small child, I discovered that if I went out into the backyard and looked at the stars, everything was more than okay. You know, it was quiet out there. Nobody was screaming at me. And I could feel, well, you used the term magic when you were talking about the night sky. I don't feel like I bring magic to the night sky. I think the magic is already there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
You know, and you can't look at a dark sky and not know that you're beholding magic, right?
Right.
So as a little child, I was like, oh, you know, and my mother, bless her, saw that this was working for me. So she bought me a little kid's astronomy book, and that my intellect just like, wow, you know. So by the time I was in the 5th grade, I knew every constellation that was, you know, visible from that latitude. And then because of my background in astronomy, I thought that astrology was bogus. I never saw an astronomy book that didn't say that, you know. So I just assumed astrology was bogus because I didn't have any other, you know, anything to contradict that. And then in 1970, I was living in Atlanta and I was working with a woman who was very interested in astrology. And I made little wisecracks about it, just as I always did. I mean, I feel really bad about that in retrospect, but I made little wisecracks about astrology. But I really respected this woman. And I remember what happened now. She asked for my birth time because she was taking a class. And she needed guinea pigs, right? And so she asked for my birth information. When she showed me my chart, I was flabbergasted. I thought it was just, you know, I thought it was just sun sign stuff. I didn't realize that the moon and Mercury and Venus, like, oh my goodness. And I was really embarrassed when I looked at the chart and I thought, oh my goodness, this is so complex. And I felt really embarrassed that I had dismissed it and that I had been snarky in my dismissal of it, you know. And she said, well, if you are interested, you know, you could sign up for the same course that I just took. And so I did. And I probably wouldn't have, except that my husband was interested. His mother had studied palmistry quite deeply, and he was really interested. So we took the class together. Anyway, that's how it happened. I had to swallow my pride.
Harriet, what was your experience when you started diving into the astrology? Did it immediately make sense to you? Was it hard for you to make the leap between the kind of mechanical, scientific, movements of things to like actually those movements have meaning and we can actually interpret them?
No, I had a lot of confusion in the beginning. Well, I'll tell you, really, there was one pivotal moment. I realized very early on that astrology is helpful. I have Saturn in the first house conjunct the ascendant. And when I read the description of that, it was like, oh, oh, you mean there's nothing wrong with me? Like, big relief. All the time I thought there was something terrible. It's just Saturn conjunct the ascendant in the first house. Oh, and so I was hooked from that moment on. And then I started doing people's charts, and I didn't charge money for it because at the time I had plenty of money. My husband had inherited a huge amount of money, and so I just decided to do artist charts because I thought that would be most interesting. So I was just working with artist charts, and I would spend hours with these artists, looking at their chart and then comparing the chart to their work. Because the themes in their work are actually quite predictable on the basis of their charts. The archetypal themes that are in the chart, are quite predictable in their work and beautiful to see play out in their work. Anyway, so I was just doing charts for people, and I would spend hours with them in their studio and all that kind of thing. And I always made sure to explain to people that I don't have special powers. I'm just reading this chart. You could learn to read it too if you wanted to take the time, And so I show people, okay, here's the sun, here's the moon, here's Mercury, here's Venus, blah, 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 blah. And then somebody said, well, where's the Earth? And I didn't know. Oh dear. Where's the Earth? So that's when I really started going back into the astronomy. So now I can tell you that by this time tomorrow, we will be more than 1.5 million miles from where we are now, thanks to the orbiting of our blue-green planet around a golden star called the sun. And by this time, a year from now, we will have completed an almost 600 million mile journey around the sun, and we'll be back at the spot in our orbit where we are now. The spot where we are now is indicated by today's date on the calendar. We were told in school that today's date on the calendar is a point in time. In fact, it's a point in space-time, a point in our Earth's orbit around the sun. Yeah. So a lot of what makes it hard to reconcile astronomy and astrology is our public school education. That's why I'm so grateful for your homeschool group.
Yes.
Explore this, So in school, everybody is told that a year is a unit of time. In fact, a year is a journey around the sun, and it can be measured in miles.
Oh gosh. So Harriet, you were the first one who told me, and I've totally butchered it ever since because I was trying to remember exactly how many miles. So when someone has a birthday, you say, what do you say if somebody has a birthday?
Congratulations on completing another orbit around the sun.
Right. And how many miles?
595 million miles.
595 million. I was saying 5 million, which is hilarious. But I said at least 5 million because I was like, I know it was at least 5 million. So 595.
We're on a journey, and astrology maps the journey. Would you want to go on a lifelong journey with no map?
No, you need the map. Yes. Okay, so 595 million miles is the number of miles that we go around the sun every single year.
Yes, that's what a year is. Years don't come and go. We orbit through them. But in school, we were told that years come and go. Birthdays come and go. They don't come and go. We're on this amazing journey. We're orbiting through these birthdays. We're orbiting through these years. We're not victims of time. We're passengers on a planet.
Oh, wow. We're not victims of time. We're passengers on a planet. Beautiful. Just one more question for you about your experience as being the celestial, being on the crew, or being the teacher of the celestial navigation to the crew of Hokulea. voyaging canoe, which some people may be familiar with Hokulea and some might not, but you were there actually teaching the crew there how to use the sky as their GPS, essentially, for that voyage, right?
Yeah, yeah. The Hokulea voyaging canoe had its first voyage in 1976, and its mission was to demonstrate that Hawaiians really did know how to navigate without the maps and technology that Western science claims are necessary. You know, when white guys came to these islands, they refused to believe that the Polynesians had navigated thousands of miles of open ocean without the maps and technologies that the white guys thought were necessary. And so the white guys just always, well, the white guys decided that that Hawaii was discovered by Polynesian fishermen who drifted off course, in spite of the fact that Polynesian fishermen back in those days never traveled with women on board, which makes it hard to explain how they populated all these islands.
That's a great point.
But that's the nature of prejudice. So the Polynesian Voyaging Society was formed in the 1970s to say, enough, you know, we don't like this prejudice, we're going to show you, you know. So they built the boat in the old style. They brought somebody in from way, way far away who taught them how to do it, because by then they had all forgotten how to do, you know. And since 1976, the Hokulea voyaging canoe has been traveling all over the Pacific with no maps, no technology, because as far as Hawaiians are concerned, all of nature is a map. It's just a matter of knowing how to read it. You know, when we were hunter-gatherers, all of nature was a map. We didn't look at little pieces of paper. We all knew how to read it, you know. Anyway, so the navigator, Nainoa Thompson, I should mention how I came into the picture. The Rapa Nui voyage, Rapa Nui is also called Easter Island, after the white people who supposedly discovered it on Easter. Rapa Nui, the Rapa Nui voyage had an all Maui crew. And the navigator, Nainoa Thompson, wasn't able to come over to Maui to teach them celestial navigation, so I was asked to do it. And it's the greatest honor of my life. I mean, you know, I'm not Hawaiian and I'm a woman. You know, like, whoa. It was a huge responsibility too, because these people are going to be getting in a little boat. They're like, ooh, what if I don't teach them well enough? Are they going to drown? You know, like, oh man, the responsibility. Anyway, it was just a huge honor, and I learned so much from these people. One of the things that I learned is that, you know, because they never developed writing, they didn't learn writing until the missionaries taught them how to read and write so they could read the Bible. They transmitted all of their knowledge through hula and chant. And for example, if I wanted to show you some navigational instrument, I would use my body, particularly, I would start, my waist would represent the Earth's equator. Makes sense, doesn't it? If you know, if you don't have a map, yeah. So my waist would represent the Earth's equator, and then the angle between my feet. Have you ever watched hula dancers? You know, their feet are rather firmly planted on the ground most of the time. Okay, but I can angle my feet so that the heels continue to touch, but that the toe end, you know, can be maybe 1 degree apart or 2 degrees apart, or you can't get them 90 degrees apart without, I mean, you can't get them 180 degrees apart without falling over, but, you know, you can introduce quite a few degrees there between the toe ends of your feet while still keeping the heels together. Every one of those angles is a piece of data about, yeah, same thing with the arms.
I'm assuming that the voyage went well and everybody lived and they got where they needed to go.
Yeah, nobody drowned. I mean, they all went and came back and it was all fine. Like,
oh, that's so great. Wow.
You know, not being Hawaiian and not being a navigator myself is like, woo.
Yes. Wow. Okay, so you started with astronomy. Then in the 70s, you brought in astrology. And then you had that moment of like, oh, wow, these two things should really come together. So why do you think, like for astrologers out there, why do you think it's important for them to incorporate astronomy? And for astronomers out there, why do you think it's important for them to incorporate astrology?
Astronomy, to me, astronomy is to astrology what anatomy is to massage. There's so much in astronomy that helps me understand why the astrological interpretations are the way they are, and allows me to go deeper. I'm not comfortable with the idea of saying that a certain sign is about, blah, 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 because the book says so, or because some other astrologer says so, or the rising sign means, such and such. I'm not comfortable with that. I need to understand why. Why is that? Just because somebody says so, that's not good enough for me. I need to understand why somebody says so. And now that I understand that the chart is a map of our journey, I see it very differently than when it was originally presented to me, that I'm sort of sitting here, the victim of all these astrological influences that are zapping me. That part I never was comfortable with. I could see that there was value to this, as I mentioned to you a few moments ago. As soon as I read the description, of Saturn conjunct the Ascendant in the first house, this is really helpful. But I was not comfortable with the idea that I'm being zapped by mysterious influences. I am comfortable with the idea that I'm on a journey and there's a map of the journey.
So can you give us an example of a why that astronomy explains? So I can completely relate, and I know a lot of people in our community can relate with this idea of, I'm not comfortable just taking it because it says it in the book or because I learned it in a class. Like, I want to know why. So can you give us an example of where astronomy explains an astrological interpretation?
Yes, I have a little picture of it. I just located it on my hard drive a couple of days ago while I was looking for something else. When you look at your astrological chart, you'll notice that in the very center of it is a little disc, a little round thing, and that little round thing is planet Earth, okay, where we live. And it's a little bit difficult to recognize this because on the chart, because the chart is flat, whether it's a piece of paper or whether it's a screen, that's flat, and the Earth is not flat. So the chart makes the Earth look like a disc when it's actually a round ball. So as you are looking at the Earth in your chart, you're going to have to use your mind's eye to help you visualize that the Earth is not a disc, it's a round ball. And it took me about 20 years to figure out the answer to the question that my client asked me when my client said, "Where's the Earth in the chart?" And and my face went really red, and I'm going, "I don't know where the Earth is." So then it spent me 20 years of going back through all the astronomy and like, where, and then to finally put it together. Anyway, so this is the little picture I made when I finally put it together. And so yeah, we're looking. The chart is done from the perspective that we're up in space gazing down onto the Earth's North Pole. Okay, if you any other perspective, this doesn't work. And that's kind of an unfamiliar perspective for most people. Usually we're accustomed to looking at, like, say, a road map or something where you're more or less looking down at the Earth's equator, but in this case, we're looking down on the Earth's North Pole. So we visualize the roundness of the Earth with the northern hemisphere protruding toward us. Yeah. And the southern hemisphere we can't see, but it's protruding away from us. Am I making any sense here?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the three-dimensionality we have to visualize. One day, I'm hoping that somebody with graphic skills can actually do this three-dimensionally, and then then the chart wouldn't be so hard to, yeah.
Exactly. I think even some of the virtual reality stuff, which some of it is kind of creepy, but when you think about how we could apply it to astrology and astronomy, yeah, it will just make things come to life in a completely different way.
Yes, you won't have to imagine the roundness of the Earth here. You won't have to imagine the northern hemisphere pooching toward you in the southern hemisphere somewhere on the other side. Yeah. And then the next thing you want to imagine is yourself, because this is the chart of your journey. So I put you in the picture here. And you, in this case, looks like a guy because that's all I was graphically able to. So he's standing there on the Earth, okay? And he's, or she, but in this case, it happens to be he, is facing the same direction that the Earth is spinning, okay? And you can see the spin of the Earth if you look at the two little arrows on the Earth. Yeah, the direction that the Earth is spinning is, have I made that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So you can see the direction of the Earth is spinning, which is counterclockwise if you're looking down on the North Pole. And the little guy there, he's looking where he's going. He's looking in the same direction that the Earth is spinning. It's really important to be looking where you're going, because the Earth is spinning you around its axis at 1,000 miles an hour, eastward around its axis at 1,000 miles an hour. And the Earth is also orbiting you around the sun at 1.63 million miles per day. And it's orbiting you eastward. So it's good to look where you're going when you're traveling at speeds like those. Yeah. So that's why the person in the chart is standing there, even though I've never seen an astrology chart that actually put the person in there. That's why I had to do it myself. Okay, and you're going eastward. Now, speaking of eastward, there's an old-fashioned word for east, which is orient. The word orient, yeah, like in British people still refer to the Orient, which is every place that's east of Greenwich Mean Time, right? And anyway, so when you're facing east, you're oriented. And our expression, our English expression, to be oriented, literally means to be facing east. In its original meaning, it's about facing east. It has come to mean many other things now, but the original meaning of to be oriented is to be facing east. And it's important to face east because, as I said, the Earth is spinning us in that direction at 1,000 miles an hour and orbiting us in that direction at 1.63 million miles a day. So there's great value in looking where you're going. And that's why the chart is all done from the perspective that the native of the chart, that term native, is that still being used in astrology?
Well, some people still use it for sure, but there's some debate about whether or not we should use it, but it's used.
Yeah, when I started studying astrology in 1970, it was still used.
Yes.
And I kind of liked the word because it has to do with birth and indigeneity. We're all indigenous to this planet, that kind of. Anyway, the person, the native, that's why the chart is done from the perspective that the native is standing there facing east, because the chart is a way to orient you to your journey. The first way to get oriented is just to face east. That's the first step. The next step is, okay, let's look at the chart a little bit more. When we look at the chart a little bit more, we see that line that divides the, where it says Eastern Horizon, and there's that other line that says Western Horizon. Yeah. So as that little person is standing there, the native, whatever you want to call him, the farthest he can see as he's looking eastward, the farthest he can see in that easterly direction is the Eastern Horizon. Anything that's below the Eastern Horizon is blocked from his view by the bulge of the Earth's, by the bulge of the Earth's roundness. And if he were to turn around and look in the opposite direction, the farthest he could see in that westerly direction would be the Western Horizon. Couldn't see anything below the Western Horizon because that's blocked from his view by the bulge of the Earth. So yeah, everything above the horizon is visible, and everything below the horizon is not visible. And then the other thing that we notice when we look at this is that the sky is divided into 12 pie slices, which, as you know, are called houses. And these 12 houses are 12 chunks of our Earth's daily spin. Okay. And there are also 12 signs, which don't show in this little diagram that I made here, but you're aware of that. And astronomy helps us to understand what are these 12 signs and what are these 12 houses. And when we see what they are astronomically, I find that's helpful. The 12 signs are not the same thing as the 12 constellations. And that's kind of an important thing to note. I don't want to go into a whole lot of depth about it, but when astronomers try to debunk astrology, one of the first things they point out is that the constellations are not the same as they used to be. But the constellations are not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the signs. The constellations are all different sizes and shapes. The signs are 12 sections of the Earth's journey around the sun. And they are the 12 sections of the Earth's relationship with the sun. The Earth has a powerful relationship with the sun because the sun's light is transformed into the Earth's life through photosynthesis. So the Earth has this powerful relationship with the sun, a living relationship with the sun. Zero Aries is the point in the Earth's relationship with the sun where day and night are equal in both hemispheres. And the days are getting longer in the northern hemisphere and shorter in the southern hemisphere. So zero Aries, when we're talking signs rather than constellations, is a point in the Earth's relationship with the sun. Zero Cancer is the point in the Earth's relationship with the sun where the days in the northern hemisphere are as long as they ever get, and the days in the southern hemisphere are as short as they ever get. Zero Libra is when day and night are equal in both hemispheres again, and the days in the northern hemisphere are about to get shorter, and the days in the southern hemisphere is about to get. Did I do a dyslexia on that one? Anyway, you see where I'm going with this.
Yes.
Okay. So the signs of the zodiac are not groups of stars that you can actually connect, where you can connect up the dots. Those things are the constellations. The signs are the about the angular relationship between the Earth and the sun. And the angle of the relationship is very important because of photosynthesis. Plants are transforming sunlight into Earth life all day long, and the angle is powerfully important here. You know, they don't do it in the dark, right? So the angle of light and dark is hugely important, and this is what we call the tropical zodiac. Okay, I can't speak about the zodiac that's used in Vedic astrology. I don't have experience with that. I'm just dealing right now with trying to make sense out of the Western astrology. So the 12 signs of the zodiac then are the 12 stages in the Earth's relationship with the sun, because the Earth is tilted. That's why we've got seasons. If the Earth were not tilted, you know, day and night would always be equal, and you know, we wouldn't have seasons. Anyway, back to the chart here. Don't want to get too far in one direction. The 12 signs are the stages of our yearly journey. The 12 houses are the stages of our daily journey. There's two aspects to the Earth's journey. There's the daily spin. The Earth is rotating us around her axis every 24 hours, and she's also orbiting us around the sun every year. And so those are two aspects of our journey. And both of those aspects of the journey are diagrammed in the chart here. The 12 houses are aspects of the daily spin, 12 sections, stages, let's say stages. That are the 12 stages of the journey, the daily journey. And the 12 signs are the 12 stages of the yearly journey. And as I use that word stages, I'm suddenly reminded of something that a client shared with me one time when we were talking about the 12 stages of the journey, you know, the 12 labors of Hercules, the 12 disciples of Christ, you know, that kind of thing. We were talking about the archetype of, 12. Yeah. And as we were talking about the 12 labors of Hercules and the 12 disciples of Christ, one of my students said, oh, I went to acting school. And in acting school, we learned that there's 12 basic characters you have to learn how to play.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, these 12 archetypes. Anyway, so we've got the 12 stages of the daily journey, the 12 stages of the yearly journey, and there's a relationship between the two of them. The daily journey is kind of like a micro version of the yearly journey. Yeah. And if somebody born at dawn, their sun will be right on the eastern horizon. Somebody born at dusk, their sun will be right on the western horizon. Somebody born at noon, the sun will be at the top of the chart. Somebody born at midnight will have the sun down at the bottom of the chart. I find when I'm with a client and I'm explaining, and I show them where the sun is in their chart, and they know, what they already know what time they were born. They had to look that up in order for me to calculate the chart for them, right? oh, I see. It makes sense. If a person is born, say, at noon, and then they look at their chart and they see that the sun's right over. Oh, of course, that's where you'd expect it to be. This is just a snapshot of the sky at the moment the person was born. And I find that's just helpful to people, because then they don't have to just believe what I'm saying because I'm saying it.
Right.
And that doesn't feel healthy.
One of the things that you're pointing out too, so I was wondering how knowing the astronomy actually helps you answer those whys. Like, why is the interpretation the way it is in astrology? And one of the things you just described is the little guy at the top of this chart can't see anything below that horizon level, which would explain why astrologers would say that planets in those lower 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses there are more internal. Like, it's more of an internal process, right? And then things above the horizon are more external, and things that people can see, that you can see about yourself very easily. But that would be one example, right, of why understanding the astronomical makeup of the chart helps you understand the interpretation of the chart.
What you said about what we can see and what we can't see, I had forgotten. Yes, many times when I used to do charts all the time, many times when I would point out to somebody, okay, what's above the horizon is what you can see, and what's below the horizon is what you can't see. Many times people would say, oh, does that mean, what you just said, and I could see the light turn on in their eyes, in their brain, like, oh, exactly. Perfect example. Thank you. I had forgotten that. I'd forgotten all the conversations that used to happen with people. Okay. But yes, let's go to the rising side. The person is standing there facing east. The farthest you can see is the eastern horizon. And if we follow that eastern horizon line all the way out to where it touches the sky, well, let's say in my case, it touches the sky at 6 degrees of Gemini. I don't know what it is in your case, but we don't have anything that shows up here. Okay. But I'll just say, 6 degrees of Gemini, okay? Because that's what it would be if in my case. And so we'd see 6 degrees of Gemini written on the chart over there, where the eastern horizon gets to the edge of the chart. And that's called the rising sign, because that shows what sign was coming up in the east when you were born. So the rising sign tells us two things. I'll keep in mind now that nothing is really rising. Nothing is really setting. It just appears to rise and set because we're viewing it from a spinning planet, okay? Our culture still uses the words sunrise and sunset, even though that's not what's really happening. And this is another thing that makes astrology difficult. It also makes astronomy difficult. Our language is about 500 years out of date. I mean, it's almost 500 years now since Copernicus proved, hey, the Earth is moving, And so it seemed to me it ought to be time for us to recognize that the sun doesn't rise, it doesn't set, nothing rises or sets. We spin toward it. As we spin toward it, it appears to rise. Yeah. So Gemini appeared to have been rising, when Harriet was born, but actually Gemini is what Harriet was traveling toward. Yeah. So Gemini is where I'm going in life. Everybody has some place that they're going in life. Okay. Now, where I'm going is not where you're going, unless, I don't know, is your rising sign Gemini also?
No, it's Aquarius.
Oh, okay. Okay. I got Aquarius on the midheaven. Okay. So Aquarius is where you're going, but Gemini is where I'm going. Okay. Another way of understanding the rising sign. And that is, if you just for a moment visualize yourself facing east. Right now, I happen to be facing south. I don't know where you happen to be facing. But if you could just imagine you're facing east, and at dawn, that would be helpful. And you see the sun appearing to rise in the east. And then you just remind yourself, the sun just appears to rise in the east. What's actually happening is you're spinning toward that direction. That's where you're going. Yeah. That's why the rising says where you're going. And so the eastern horizon part of you, now when I say the eastern horizon part of you, I'm realizing I need to pause here for just a moment. Something I neglected to say earlier is that this map that we're looking at On one level, it's just a snapshot of the sky at the moment you were born. Okay. On another level, it's a map of you as the universe. Okay. Because we know macrocosm is contained in the microcosm. We know that through fractal geometry. We used to know it through other things, but fractal geometry shows that the macro is contained in the micro. So this chart, or anybody's chart, is a map of you as the universe. Y-O universe, I like to use that expression. It's a map of you as the universe. Okay. As the universe, you have a sun, you have a moon, you have a Mercury, you have a Venus, and so on. Each of these is what a psychologist would call one of your potentials. Okay. For example, your sun is your potential to shine like a star. Okay. The moon, the cycle of the moon is the cycle of a woman's womb. So the moon is your ability to feel the way you feel when you're curled up in the womb, content, fulfilled, and secure. And the moon is also your ability to behave as if you were a womb. In other words, to care, to nurture, to mother, And Mercury in the ancient myths is the messenger. Mercury is the ability to articulate words on the tip of your tongue, that kind of thing. And Mars is your ability to, Mars is friction to the point of spark. It's the rush of adrenaline, the animalistic fight or flight, it's your animal instincts. And we could go on, but right now, let's just stay with the basics. So the chart is a map of you as the universe. And when you look at the chart, you see, okay, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, blah, 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 blah. You also see a horizon line, and you see that midheaven thing we didn't talk about yet that divides the chart, the eastern half of the chart from the western half of the chart. Yeah. Everything in the eastern sky is rising, everything in the western sky is setting. And so you look at all that, and it's a little bit overwhelming. You think, where do we start? Okay. So I think the best place to start is not, the best place to start is by just momentarily saying where we don't start. We don't start by looking to see where Pluto was when you were born, because Pluto spends, maybe 20 years moving through any one sign. So everybody born within 20 years of you has Pluto in the same sign. So knowing what sign Pluto was in doesn't tell us much about you personally. It just tells us what generation you belong to. Similarly, Neptune, Uranus, So if we want to know something about you personally, let's look at the parts of the chart that change most often, okay? All the degrees around the outer edge of the chart, which don't show up in my little diagram here, but we know there's 360 of them. All the degrees around the outer edge of the chart, each one of those degrees changes by 1 degree every 4 minutes of Earth spin, okay? So when I was born, 6 Gemini was on the eastern horizon. If I had been born 4 minutes later, it would have been 7 Gemini. If I had been born 4 minutes earlier, it would have been 5 Gemini. So we see that the most personal information in the chart is the stuff that relates to the daily spin. In other words, the houses. Okay, and but not all 12 of the houses are equally important. The most important houses are the ones that are bordered by the eastern horizon, okay? Because everything in the first house, although it's right next to the 12th house, everything in the first house is below the horizon, and everything in the 12th house is above the horizon. Big difference there, yeah? Similarly with the 6th and 7th houses. Then the other dividing line here that's important with regard to the houses is the line that divides the left side of the chart from the right side of the chart. In other words, the eastern horizon, eastern half of the sky from the western half of the sky. Everything in the eastern half of the sky is rising. Everything in the western half of the sky is setting. Big difference. You can feel that in terms of the dynamics. Yeah. And if there were no gravity, you would just fly off in the direction of your eastern horizon and never come back, because the Earth is spinning you in that direction at 1,000 miles an hour. You see that gravity is pulling him toward the core of the Earth. The Earth's gravity is concentrated at the core of the Earth, right? It's called the center of gravity. Yeah. Okay. The Earth's center of gravity, we can't see it here, but if we go from the North Pole to the South Pole, halfway in the middle there is the Earth's center of gravity. Yeah. And so he's being pulled toward the Earth's center of gravity by gravity. Okay. And so that's why he doesn't fly off in the direction of his rising sign. So the sign that's at the top there, at the midheaven, I like to call it the midheaven, but I also like to call it the gravity line. Okay, it's the midheaven because it's midway between what's rising and what's setting, but it's also the gravity line, and the gravity is important. If you've ever tried to flap your wings and take off, you know, gravity's pretty powerful. Okay, so that whatever sign is at the top there tells us why you cannot leave the earth. In other words, what you came here to bring down to earth. There's some reason you're here on this planet. There's something you came here to bring down. And you don't have to bring it down to earth all by yourself. It's not like you have to tug it down and pull it down and yank it down and hold it down, because you got gravity to help you. But what's on the top there at the midheaven tells us like your life's purpose, your life's work, your life's mission, what you came here to bring down to earth. Now, in some astrology books, they use the word career. I find that the word career is a little bit too corporate, especially for people who have maybe like a whole lot of Aquarius planets in that house, or Pisces, you know, the corporate thing doesn't really accurately describe. So I just kind of like to say it's what you came here to bring down to earth. Am I making any sense here?
I love that so much, Harriet. I love that perspective and tying it in with gravity. That is super helpful, Harriet. And those are some really great examples right there of how understanding the astronomy helps you understand why we interpret things the way we interpret them in astrology, which is, you know, bringing us back to the theme of this podcast of why astrology and astronomy should really come back together. And so we're focused right now on why astrologers would really benefit from understanding the astronomy. Why do you think astronomers would really benefit from understanding astrology?
Because they really need each other. Astronomy without astrology is a picture of a sky that's just vast, remote, impersonal, has nothing to do with anyone's life, has no place or purpose for people, except maybe at the near end of a telescope. The best you can hope for is maybe one day you'll become an astronaut, but one out of a gazillion people can hope for that. I mean, the picture of the sky that's given to us by astronomy is just, we're just aliens on our own planet. That's the picture that you get of a human being if you look at the sky through purely through the eyes of astronomy. We're just aliens on our own planet. The most we can hope for, maybe one day somebody will give us a chance to look through a telescope. It's really nice to look at the NASA photos. That's been a big help, you know, but it's all out there. It's the out there thing that's very alienating. It's cold. Yeah, it's just remote. It's cold. It's impersonal. I think it has a lot to do with why so many people are on antidepressants. And
Yeah, it makes me think of almost like the head without the heart. It's like it's understanding, it's logical, it makes sense, you know, it's predictable. There's certain things about it, but there's no heart, there's no answer or even exploration of the question, well, why? And there's the curiosity on some level, which I just learned is the Greek foundation of the word curious is to care.
Oh,
which is like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, to care, you actually care. You want to learn, you want to know. But I love that. So why do you think, like you even admit that when you were an astronomer only, that you would laugh at astrology, that it was like this, you know, pseudoscience, ridiculous sort of outcast. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's so misunderstood by astronomy at this point in time?
I think the main problem definitely was for me, but I think it's also true of other people. Is most people, their only experience of astrology is those crappy little newspaper horoscopes. You know, if that's all you've seen, of course you're not going to, you know, give it a whole lot of credence. Yeah, so that's all I ever saw. And then I was reading all these astronomy books, which told me that it's bogus, you know. And since I wasn't particularly impressed by anything I ever saw. Well, for example, I'll give you an example from my personal life. Okay, my sun is in Taurus. My Mercury is conjunct Uranus in Gemini. My Mercury is conjunct the Ascendant in Gemini, and my Mercury is conjunct Saturn in Gemini. Saturn is in the first house, Uranus is in the 12th house. No one's ever suspected that I'm a Taurus. There, if anybody asks me what my sun, they always, you a Gemini, because you can see how active my mind is. I'm constantly accessing data, processing data, that's what comes across, So I'd never, if I ever did read any of those little newspaper horoscopes, I didn't relate to whatever they said about the Taurus. So that was another, they're so generalized.
Mm-hmm.
So it was only when I had my coworker, Helen, and I had a lot of respect for Helen. She was a very capable woman, and I was like, oh, Helen, how could you be, but I didn't, I didn't go too far with that because I had a lot of respect for her. And then when she showed me my own chart and I saw, oh my goodness, this is way more complex than those little newspapers. Yeah. So
it's just misunderstanding or just lack of exposure and lack of knowledge about what it actually is. So it's almost like it has a PR problem. It has yeah.
Yeah. And I should mention to you, and stop me if this is off target, but for years now, I've been doing weekly stargazing programs on Pacific Whale Foundation boat that goes out of Malaya Harbor.
Oh, wow.
And we're out there for 2.5 hours, enjoying whales when the whales are here, and enjoying, the illusion of sunset. I always point out that it's an illusion. And, and the night sky. And I function best when I'm bouncing off people's questions. I don't like to just play the recordings that are in my head. I'm old enough. I got lots of recordings in my head, but it's no fun playing the same old recordings. So I just bounce off people's questions. And inevitably the astrology question comes up, and I love it because it's giving me, but I also know there's plenty of people on that boat. And I can tell from the conversations that I've had with, there's plenty of people on that boat who think astrology is total bullshit, so it puts me in a really interesting spot there. Because, when you're in the visitor industry, you cannot offend any of the visitors, just as when you're, behind a counter in the store, you cannot offend the customer, right? So I'm in the interesting position of having to answer the question the person is asking about astrology without offending the other person who thinks that it's bogus.
I would love to hear what you say. All right. So to kind of summarize, the astronomy without astrology is kind of like it reminds me of like a robot. Like a robot could do a lot of things humans could do, but it doesn't have a heart, right? It doesn't have the emotions. It doesn't have it just doesn't have a heart, right? And astrology without astronomy, I love how you said it's like being a massage therapist, but not understanding anatomy. That it's helping you understand why certain things might be important versus other things, or just it's helping you understand the map at a much more what were you, what's the word? Structural. There we go. Structural level. There it is. And there was a time when they were together, right? Astrology and astronomy were always together for most of time.
Of our human existence, we were hunter-gatherers. As hunter-gatherers, we look to the sky as our clock, as our calendar, as our compass, as our GPS. And if you go back to 99%, if you don't have to go back, 99% of our existence, the sky was our clock, our calendar, our compass, our GPS, and we all knew how to read it. There was no difference between astronomy and astrology for the first 99% of our human existence.
Wow, 99%.
Yeah, I just recently learned that we were hunter-gatherers for 99% of our human existence. They didn't teach us that in school because hunter-gatherers didn't write history books.
So can you repeat? You say the sky was our compass, our calendar, our GPS,
and our clock.
It's just so cool. It's like, I love that. Harriet, thank you so much. I'm so honored to have had you on this show, and I hope that we can do it again sometime. And I can't wait for the next opportunity to be under the actual sky with you, with your pointer, you explaining things and making it come to life in very new ways. So, and maybe someday some people from our community can come out and be on that boat with you.
Every Saturday night I do it.
Every Saturday night. How did I not know this? Amazing. That's so cool. So if any of you are ever on Maui, make sure that you look up the Hawaii Pacific Whale Foundation. And then Harriet does her little journey on Saturday nights, which would be just like a total added bonus to that whole experience of going and whale watching. Yeah. Okay. Anything else that you want to say before we sign out, Harriet?
I'm very grateful to you for, I kind of gave up on the idea that there might be any astrologers interested in astronomy. So I'm really happy to know that's not the case.
That is not the case. You have just landed in a community of people that are enthusiastic about it, that are earnest and sincere, and probably sometimes kind of like, oh, it's kind of scary. It's hard to understand.
Scary, but that's what makes it fun too.
Yes, that's so true. On this journey, this 595 million mile journey every single year.
Imagine your age in miles.
Oh, imagine your age in miles. Oh my gosh, it's so fun. That's a lot of miles. Wow. Incredible. Well, thank you so much. And I hope to see you soon. Thanks to all of you for being here. For any of you interested in going into this direction of like, how do I marry my astrology with my astronomy? Like Harriet said, the sky has always been a clock. It has always been a calendar. If you want to be able to map your personal clock and calendar to the movement of the sky, you can learn how to do that in our upcoming course with historian and astrologer Christopher Renstrom. Harriet, you might like that. If you're interested in taking that, let me know, because he's really cool. Yeah. So that enrollment is open right now. Class starts on March 3rd. If you're watching this later than March 3rd of 2022, you can still access the course. It will be available for you into the foreseeable future. And all you do is go to astrologyhub.com/cosmic calendar, see if it's right for you, and you can enroll today. Thanks everybody for being here, for being a part of our community, and as always, for making astrology and astronomy now a part of your life. We'll catch you on the next episode.